Welcome to Eat the Treat. I'm Dr. Amaris Williams, and we're a nonprofit that aims to end health disparities. I have a PhD in nutrition, and I'm an avid foodie and a cook. And as part of Eat the Treat, I do live cook along cooking demonstrations every first and third Saturday um, on with hypertension and diabetes friendly recipes. Sometimes the diabetes friendliness requires a few modifications, but it's DASH diet based, so dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and oftentimes or almost always low salt, low sodium. So today we're making chicken pot pie, which is one of my favorites. And so let's get started. Let me just change the camera angle. Okay, so today we're working with chicken, which means I'm gonna cut that on the board last, and that's just to stop cross contamination. Um, this is more of an issue if we weren't going to cook all of our vegetables, like if we were going to be eating some of them raw, then definitely you need to avoid cross contamination. But it's also good practice just to avoid cutting chicken and then cutting something else that's not chicken, um, and doesn't have salmonella on it, because chicken does have salmonella. Okay, so first I'm just going to chop up this onion, um, and I'm going to put a little bit of oil in this pan here, maybe about a tablespoon. And I'm going to cut my onion in half lengthwise through the root and the stem, and that's just so I have a flat surface and it's not going to roll around on me. And then for this, I'm going to dice the onion, so I'm going to cut it in the same parallel to the direction that I cut it in half, so from roots to stem, but not all the way through this time. And hello, everyone. I see people in the chat. Thank you for participating. And then cut it perpendicular to the cuts you just made. So across the onion, not lengthwise. If that makes sense. And I'm just going to put it in the pan. The pan is not on yet because when I did this before, my onion got nice and brown and crispy, so I'm going to start cooking it after I've cut up the carrots. Because if I start cooking it before I cut up the carrots, like I said, it gets brown and crispy. So, or you can just put it on really low heat right now if you want, but I'm just going to wait. Alright. Oh, my oven is preheated, and your oven should be on 475. So go ahead and turn your oven on to 475. And my oven is singing to me right now. Okay, next up is carrots. So I've got 3 large carrots. They're pretty ugly, but they should be delicious. And I'm just going to peel them all and then chop them, slice them really. The carrots I want in larger pieces than the onion. And this is all personal preference. So go ahead and cut these vegetables as you see fit. You don't have to do what I do. And these vegetables can be switched out for other things that you like. There's no reason to limit yourself. You can put any vegetable in here. Another thing that would be good in here, let's stick with non-starchy vegetables, especially if you have blood sugar concerns. So I wouldn't put potatoes in here because that will decrease the nutritional quality of the meal a little bit. But other vegetables in here would be Romanesco. That would be good. Anything that can stand up to being simmered and then baked. So you wouldn't want to put Probably not spinach in here. I think that's a little too delicate of a vegetable. But the dinosaur kale or the Tuscan kale that we're using today will stand up quite nicely to that treatment. All right, so I'm just going to top and tail my carrots. That just means cut both ends off of them. And then I'll slice them. And since these are quite large carrots, I think what I'm going to do is slice the thin ends and then cut the thick ends in half and then slice the halves. So that just looks like this. Just slice them until you get to the meatier parts. And I'm going to throw this in the pan. And then I'm just going to take the meatier part and cut it in half lengthwise. And then put the flat side down so it doesn't roll on me. And then slice it. Okay, and then I'll throw that in the pan. And I think I'm ready to turn my pan on. So I'm going to do that. Wrong button. So I've got it on 4 out of 5. You may want to increase that if you are working with a non-induction stove. So maybe 5 out of 10. Oh, I said 4 out of 5. I meant 4 out of 10. So medium low. But if you're working with a gas stove or an electric stove that's not induction, then you may want to turn it up just a little bit. Okay, last carrot. And full disclosure, I forgot to buy celery at the store. So I'm not going to be using celery today. So if you are using celery, make sure it's washed and then cut it the same way I'm cutting the carrots. So just perpendicular to the length of the celery rib. Just slice it, basically. And then throw it in the pan with the onion and the carrots. And cook it all together. I spaced and I forgot to get celery, and then I didn't realize until it was too late to go get it. So you can cut your celery now while I cut the broccoli, because you guys are either using broccoli or the kale. I'm using both broccoli and kale, so you'll have a little bit of extra time. If you're using broccoli, I've got half a head of broccoli here. What I want to do is cut the florets off, the florets or florets. I'm not sure how you really say that. And then I'll cut the florets into smaller pieces. But I'm just going at it with a knife, cutting off little florets. Of course, keeping my fingers well out of the way, because as many of you have noticed, this knife is sharp. Now this stem piece of the broccoli, you can keep this in your freezer until you're ready to make your cream of broccoli soup, which is not something you should eat all the time, because it's usually made with cream and that's a lot of saturated fat. But the stems make delicious flavoring. You can also use it to make vegetable stew. So when you have bought your groceries and then you got vegetables in your fridge that are about to go bad, just throw them all in a pot with some of the broccoli stems that you've saved, and the broccoli stems lend a very good flavor to your vegetable stew. And you can throw them in there with some veggie stock and some potatoes or whatever you've got on hand. Okay, so I'm going to put these broccoli florets in a bowl. And then move to the kale. I'm going to cut up the kale. Okay, and now, so I've got this bunch of kale with a nice rubber band on it. And I'm just going to start at the leafy end and cut 1-inch slices until I get to the stem end, at which point I'll stop cutting. And then I'll throw the stems away because they can get a little chewy. Okay, so that looks like this. Don't forget to stir your carrots and your onions. So I'm just going to cut off the leaf tips and then keep cutting slices. Careful not to cut my fingers. And when you start to see more stem than leaf, stop cutting and discard the rest. And I'm getting close here. I think that's enough. I'm going to put the rest away. And then I'll put my kale in a bowl because we're not going to put that in until later. Okay. We'll put the kale in last besides the frozen peas. So the kale goes in right before the frozen peas. But the broccoli goes in after the chicken. So, now I've cut all my vegetables, so now I can cut my chicken. I'm just gonna, I've got, how many? 4 boneless, skinless chicken thighs here. You can use whatever type of chicken you want, but if you have something with skin in it, then it's gonna have more fat than something without skin, so just keep that in mind. And then once you cut up your chicken in a bite-sized pieces, it doesn't have to be fancy, just go ahead and throw it in the pot. So, I'm cutting it one way and then rotating the slices that I made and then cutting it the other way. And I think I need to sharpen my knife. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to say in the intro, I meant to tell everyone, today is May the 4th, and so all the Star Wars fans, May the 4th be with you, which is, I've been waiting a long time to say that. And I know I'm nerdy, but that's just the way it is. So, May the 4th be with you. Alright, one more chicken thigh to cut up, and then I'll stir everything together. Okay. Someone thinks I'm a little bit funny. Alright. So, now we've got the salmonella done. Now's a good time to wash your hands. I'm just going to wipe mine on this rag here, but if you've got soap and water, that's even better. Go for it. And now I'm going to turn up my pan to 5 out of 10. Oops. And start cooking my chicken. So we've already added 1 tablespoon of oil to this pan. We're going to add another 3 tablespoons to make a 1/4 cup of oil, and then we'll add a 1/4 cup of flour. So you'll notice that we have the same amount of fat, which is the oil, as we have flour. And that is the recipe for a roux. A roux is just a thickener, and so it's going to make our chicken stock that we add later nice and thick and satisfyingly textured. Would chicken breast be too dry for the pie? I don't think so, especially if it's marinated or brined. But if you just want to cut up some chicken breast and put it in there, you can definitely do that. I would use smaller pieces of chicken breast than chicken thigh. And what's going to stop it from getting too dry is that we're going to put the chicken stock in there with the thickened roux, with the roux to thicken it, and that's going to give us some moisture and stop the chicken drying out so quickly. So you can definitely use chicken breast in this recipe if you don't like dark meat. Okay, so I'm going to add the other 3 tablespoons of oil, and then I'm just eyeballing it, as you can tell, and then I'll add my 1/4 cup of flour. Alright, so I've got a 1/4 cup of flour here, and I'm just going to sprinkle it over the, if it'll sprinkle it over the ingredients in the pan. And keep your flour out because we're going to use it to make the crust, which is going to be biscuits. Yes, I make chicken pot pie with biscuits on top, and it's delicious. I'm sharing this recipe with you. One of my favorites. So yeah, it's biscuit dough that we just drop on top of the filling. Alright, so you'll notice that the flour has absorbed all of the oil and has started to turn a little yellow from the oil and also from being cooked. So now it's time to add the chicken stock. And I'm using this no salt added chicken stock, which means I will probably add a little salt at the end. But I like using no salt added chicken stock because then I can control exactly how much salt is in my food. With the low sodium, yes, it's less sodium than the full sodium version, but it still has more sodium than you may want to be eating. So I'm going to pour my chicken stock, 2 cups of chicken stock in the pan. And no, the chicken is not cooked yet, but that's fine. We're going to cook it for much longer. And then we also want to put, I think it's 1/2 cup of milk. Yes, 1/2 cup of milk. And I am using skim milk. The reason I'm using skim milk is because we've already got a lot of oil from the roux, and we don't need saturated fat on top of that. So we've got a relatively healthy fat in the olive oil, but we don't want the saturated fat that comes in milk. So use skim milk in your pot pie recipe filling. Okay, and we're going to let this cook and thicken And then we'll add the broccoli and the kale. So I'm going to add my broccoli now because I want my broccoli to be more cooked in this recipe. A lot of times I'll have my broccoli be al dente and a little firm to the bite. That's what al dente means. And for a pot pie, I kind of want everything to melt in the mouth. So I'm going to add my broccoli. Okay, while that's coming up to temperature, let's make the biscuit dough. So get yourself a nice large bowl and put 2 cups of flour in it. So you got 2 cups of flour going in the bowl. And by the way, your oven should be on 475. So if you don't have your oven on, go ahead and turn it on now so it'll be preheated by the time we're done with this. Okay, 2 cups of flour in the bowl. Next, 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And I had to buy new baking powder because my old baking powder I had for a long time and I think it stopped working. So I got a fresh thing of baking powder today. And put a tablespoon of that in there. And then finally, half a teaspoon of salt. And I'm using iodized salt, so small granules of salt, like regular table salt for the biscuits. Because if you use the coarse salt that I normally use and that I normally recommend people use, it doesn't dissolve as well. It doesn't dissolve as quickly. In the biscuit dough. I'm going to use the coarse salt in the pot pie filling though, because the coarse salt, you feel it with your fingers and you know exactly how much salt you're putting in there. Whereas with a sprinkler or a shaker of table salt, it's really hard to gauge how much salt you've actually put in your food. So use a fork, stir up your dry ingredients. Then in a separate measuring cup, put in 2/3 cup of milk and 1/3 cup of olive oil. So I'm using skim milk again, and I'm going to put 2/3 cup of skim milk in there. If you don't have enough milk, you can also use chicken stock in these biscuits, and it actually comes out pretty good, especially when you're using it with a chicken pot pie. So it really marries the flavor of the filling and the topping. So 2/3 cup of milk and 1/3 cup of olive oil. And then we're going to pour this into the dry ingredients all at one time and stir it up. And at some point you may get to the point where you can't stir it with your fork, and then you can get in there with your hands and mush everything together. That's what I did. But it's not going to get so hard that you have to roll it with a rolling pin. You can easily manipulate this dough with your hands, and that's why I like it. That and it tastes good. But you don't really need a rolling pin. You don't need a surface, a floured surface or anything. You can just make it in this bowl. And I'm to the point where I need to use my hands. So let me go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to knead it a little bit. And that just means fold the dough in half, rotate it, mash it out, fold it in half again, rotate it, mash it out, fold it in half again. And so that's ready. That's done. So I'm going to add my kale to my filling. And you don't really need to cook the kale because we're going to put it in the oven and it'll cook in there. but I do want to stir it in. So I'm just gonna stir my kale into the sauce. And before we put the biscuits on top, all we're going to do is taste it and adjust the seasonings. And that's salt and pepper. If you want it a little spicy, you can add some cayenne. We didn't put any garlic in this, but if you like that savory umami flavor that you get from garlic, you can definitely put some garlic powder in here, or when you're cooking the roux, add some garlic paste. And we're almost done with this demo. Just gotta season and drop the biscuit dough on top. My sauce is thickening some, but it's not as thick as it's going to be yet. But if you find your sauce is too runny, you can add a little bit more flour. It's better to add the flour before you add the liquid, but you can still add it after the fact. Just make sure you sprinkle it over top and not dump it in, because then you might get clumps if you just dump it in. So just a little forewarning on that. Okay, so we got plenty of vegetables in here, plenty of lean meat. So we've got boneless, skinless chicken. We got broccoli. We got the aromatics, carrots and onions, and celery. If you're at home, you've got celery. And I'm just going to leave the heat on since it's still thickening, and taste it. So I'm going to get some sauce on my spoon and adjust the seasonings. Careful doing this because the chicken may not be 100% cooked yet, but the sauce is going to be hot enough that it'll kill any bacteria. So you can go ahead and taste just the sauce. I wouldn't eat any chicken at this point. And that definitely needs salt. But otherwise it has nice flavor. So I'm going to use my coarse salt, which I keep in this little thingy thing. Yes, I did add the flour. I added the flour when I added the extra oil, and we cooked it and we made a roux. So I've got about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt here. Probably need at least 1/2 teaspoon based on my taste test. Alright, so I got about 1/2 teaspoon of salt in there, and I'm going to stir that in and give it another taste. Alright, so just in the final steps of this process, and this just goes to show that chicken pot pie does not have to be an all-day thing. And if you make it with a pie crust, it usually is, especially if you make your own pie crust, because making pie crust takes forever. Plus, usually pie crust calls for butter, which is, of course, saturated fat. Not the best, especially if you're trying to watch your cholesterol. Alright, so I'm going to taste it one more time. Get some sauce. Oh yeah, that's much better. That's good. Okay. 1/2 teaspoon did it for me. So I'm going to take my biscuit dough and just drop it on top. This recipe for this biscuit dough came from The Joy of Cooking. which is a great cookbook my mom actually got for me. And if you only want to have one cookbook and not a library of cookbooks like I have behind me, that is the cookbook that I would recommend you get, because it has such a wide variety of recipes. And so you're just taking walnut-sized pieces, and this is walnuts that have not been shelled. So the walnuts as they come from a tree, those size pieces, and just dotting it around your pan. Some in the middle. And then you're going to have biscuits on top of your hot pie filling. And when you serve it up, it's going to be kind of like chicken and dumplings, but biscuits and flaky and fluffy and delicious. And it's just like that. It's ready to go in the oven. And this is how I make my pot pie. I'm going to turn this off. It's delicious, it's healthy, and it's not that arduous. So I'm going to put this in the oven, and then I'm going to get one that I made earlier today, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so what you're looking for is you want your biscuits to be kind of browned on the tips, like little peaks, little pointy parts to brown. And then that should take between 10 and 12 minutes. And you can see I've already started eating this. I couldn't resist. It's good. I'll put this down here. And and that's it. And then you'll be ready to eat. So 10 to 12 minutes. But just, check on it. Start checking on it at 8 minutes probably. And when it's done, pull it out. And then let it sit for a little while, because it's going to be piping hot, obviously. And then you can serve it up. Alright, so let me change the view and do an outro. Okay, so today we made chicken pot pie. It's a hypertension-friendly recipe. It can be diabetes-friendly. Just limit your biscuit consumption. I know that's going to be hard because the biscuits are very delicious. But it's low in saturated fat. It's high in vegetables and fiber. And we've got protein. We've got all the good things in there. And let's see, there was another. Oh, okay. Thank you. It's this I try to make all my recipes good for people who say they're non-cooks, but everyone's a cook. You can be a cook. It's not hard. But thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoyed this pot pie. And I'll see you guys the third Saturday of the month, which is the 18th, I think. So I'll see you. There's no Star Wars reference for the 18th. Sorry.